Hello, and welcome to After Scientology Straight Up and Vertical. This is the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I get together and we go over the week's events in the world of Scientology as reported on Tony's Substack. And you can see the address right there, by the way, for Tony's Substack. I've failed to mention that the last few weeks, but if you're not subscribed, get subscribed. Tony, welcome back to the show.
Well, it's good to be here. Hopefully, things are still holding together. This whole world seems to be crumbling, but you and I just keep soldiering on, right, Chris?
That's exactly right. We will offer news and informative entertainment to the end of our days. So this week we are talking Linkin Park, Emily Armstrong. There was some controversial statement or something.
Yeah, well, it was about a year ago, you'll remember, that Linkin Park announced that it was getting going again. It had been on a hiatus for 7 years because Chester Bennington had died. And so now they said, we're getting going again, and we've hired Emily Armstrong to be our new singer. And that was controversial because Emily's a Scientologist, and her mother is a hardcore Sea Org Scientologist. And that was the underground bunkers portion of that story. I mean, it was covered by a lot of different people, but Mike Rinder had told us that he was actually in the hole with Emily's mother, Gail Armstrong. So that was our contribution. So people were all trying to find out about this story about a year ago, and the thing that was the most controversial was at one point she had joined a group of Scientologists who showed up at Danny Masterson's arraignment a year or two before his trial. And so she put out a statement apologizing for that, saying she realized it was a mistake. She never talked to Danny again. But in that statement, she never used the word Scientology, and she still has not said a word about it. But that story kind of died down because Linkin Park's done really well with her. They've had some real success, and recently she put together a little 8 picture story on her Instagram about how life is good for her right now, and you showed her at a Dodgers game and showed her at the beach. And what Sonny Pereira noticed and what she brought to my attention was the 8th picture in those 8 was a picture of her hand flipping off the word therapy that had been spray painted by somebody on a curb. And for a Scientologist, that's kind of an interesting image because we know that Scientology hates psychiatry like nothing else in the world, and they claim that psychiatrists have been around for trillions of years and are booby trapping our mind. Well, they don't talk to the public too much about that, but we know that's what Hubbard was telling them. It's in the lectures. It's what Scientologists are taught. They just don't like to talk about that stuff in public too much. But yeah, they see psychiatry as the greatest evil in the entire galaxy. And so for this woman that we know has a Scientology background to be flipping off the word therapy, it seemed like, something worth making note of. So I did, and I pointed out. And then I got to tell you, Chris, I got some blowback, not from ex-Scientologists who all could see why we would point that out. Sure, I mean, Scientology, even when people leave Scientology, they have a hard time getting therapy because they've been so indoctrinated against it. So ex-Scientologists could see why we would point that out, but fans of Emily Armstrong really came at us and said, look, she flips off everything. It's no big deal. She's talked about getting therapy. You're just an old boomer who doesn't understand what a young person is saying. Okay, maybe she's saying the opposite of what it looks like. I don't know. But I think that even with her background, she must know how people would interpret her doing that. So there was some back and forth. Hey, I don't mind that. I'd like to hear from her fans. That's cool. And I understand why they're unhappy. But I still think it was worth pointing out that, this woman who's got this Scientology background in a little story about how good life is flipping off therapy like she doesn't need it, which is a very much a Scientology attitude. What do you think, Chris? Was it worthwhile pointing that out?
Absolutely, of course it was, and it's of course there are going to be fans who are going to fan, and they're going to hey, my guru, my celebrity, can do no wrong. And so out come the boomer, whatever. Let me say this, right? Scientology doesn't Scientologists don't just not like psychiatry. It's not just a big no, no, no to psychiatry. It's a strong core belief of Scientology that they have an alternative form of method of therapy that is real therapy. That the stuff that they call therapy is damaging, harmful. In fact, oddly, all the things we say Scientology auditing does to you, that's what they say psychiatry and psychology are doing to you. And while psychiatry gets the brunt of the hate, psychology, there's plenty of hate going towards the psychologists and therapists and even family therapists, child therapists. I mean, anything court appointed, none of it is okay. None of it is wanted in a Scientologist day-to-day life. And I think that's where the fans miss the point of what we're trying to say, is that it's not just some rando picture flipping because she flips a lot of things off. It's a statement that not just Scientology, that not just therapy is bad, all therapy, but we have the only real answers. Right. And when she does stuff like that, it's not helpful.
Well, and there's a real simple solution, and that is she can finally say something about Scientology, how she feels about things. I mean, she's the one, instead of her fans attacking us for not claiming that we don't understand what she's trying to say, she can tell people what she's trying to say. She can say something. She can use the word Scientology. She can explain her background in it. She can say, because, one of the criticisms from a year ago was that Chester Bennington struggled with his mental health and urged people to get mental health care. And for a person like that to be replaced by a Scientologist, there were people then, a year ago, saying this is really inappropriate. It's a real slap to the legacy of Chester Bennington. So, this is why all of these things are worth bringing up. And really, she can easily settle things by talking about it, but she's not going to. She's on a gravy train.
Exactly. And let's also put forward the very real possibility. I'll say 90%. I mean, I'll grade this quite high, that there's a very, very strong possibility that whether she is a practicing Scientologist or not, she is forbidden by her mother to talk about it, bring it up at all, say anything about it. Don't open that can of worms, might be the communication to her, or it could be a more heavy-handed messaging. We have no idea what that relationship is like. But the fact that her mother is a high-level Sea Org member, her fans brushing that off is really not okay. It's a kind of enabling of Scientology because she won't talk about it.
Yeah.
It's obvious that she won't talk about it. The same way Tom Cruise won't talk about it. And
yeah, I mean, her mother literally wrote speeches for David Miscavige.
Exactly.
And Mitch Brisker saw her mother getting dressed up to go to one of Emily's shows. So, Mitch's impression was that they're tight.
Yep.
And, Gail's background as a speechwriter for David Miscavige is somebody who served in the hole, somebody who took part in the smear campaign against Mike Rinder. This woman is part of the Scientology secret police. Exactly. And so it's really dicey for Emily to say anything about it at all. But I'm sorry, that's a story. That's interesting.
Exactly. And it should be pursued because there's a question mark there. There's a mystery there. And she's a public figure. So this is the scrutiny you get,
Yeah.
And especially when you're connected. I mean, and again, this isn't just kind of like trying to look for some salacious bits. This is an abusive, destructive cult we're talking about. So let's keep that in mind all the time here. All right. Now, moving forward, we had some interesting good news on the Whitney Mills lawsuit.
Yeah. So, Whitney's mom, Layla Mills, is suing the Church of Scientology. And she also wanted to sue the notorious Scientologist Dr. David Minkoff. But by Florida law, she had to wait a certain period and go through what's called a pre-discovery phase, where the two sides trade information. It's a law that encourages people to try to exchange information with a doctor before trying to sue them. I understand the law and why it exists, but eventually she got through that requirement, and she did add David Minkoff to the lawsuit. Minkoff's attorney submitted a motion saying that no, you didn't observe this period properly. And one of the problems was that when Layla Mills, the story is that Whitney Mills was having such terrible mental health problems. And as a Scientologist, she was being encouraged by her friends to do anything but seek proper mental health care. And her doctor, Dr. Minkoff, was diagnosing her with things like cancer and parasites and things that she didn't even have, and was doing everything he could to encourage her not to get mental health care. So what Layla Mills did, what the mother did was before filing this lawsuit, she went and consulted some experts, an infectious disease specialist, a neurologist, and a professor of psychiatry, and gave them the medical records, gave them the communications between Dr. Dave Minkoff and Whitney, and they all just totally condemned him, saying that he just didn't do the most basic things to get her the proper care, and misdiagnosed her and just made everything worse, so that they blamed him for her taking her life. So that's in the lawsuit. Now, what the attorney for Minkoff was arguing was that that's not correct, because you consulted infectious disease specialist and a psychiatrist and a neurologist, but you didn't consult a alternative medicine person like Dr. Minkoff himself, and that's what Florida law states. So that's what this hearing was about this week. Mark Bunker went for us, and he saw the judge, this attorney from Minkoff talking to the judge about this, and the judge made a great point, according to Mark Bunker. And he was like, okay, maybe these doctors weren't alternative medicine doctors, but what they were addressing were things in Whitney's case that they were experts in. So, for example, Dr. Minkoff told her, you have this thing called chronic Lyme, which is pseudoscience. I'm not saying Lyme disease is pseudoscience. Lyme disease is a particular bacteria that causes it. But quacks like Dr. Minkoff claim that there's this thing called chronic Lyme, which doesn't exist. Anyway, okay, well, does she have Lyme or not? And that infectious disease specialist, that's his specialty. And he said, look, if he really wanted to figure out if she had Lyme disease or not, he didn't order the proper tests. So the judge is saying, okay, maybe this doctor that Layla Mills consulted was not an alternative medicine guy like Minkoff, but he's an expert in this subject. And then of course the same thing for the psychiatrist, that she had mental health problems. So I thought that was very encouraging. That means that this judge, isn't this always a situation, Chris? What we're always looking for is the judge paying attention. Is the judge really reading this stuff? Is the judge really understanding where the issue is? And I think in this case we really have that. This judge really seems to understand the case well, and he denied that motion. So that was very encouraging. The next thing is in a month, they'll have another hearing for another motion from Minkoff. They want to dismiss the case. And one of the things they're arguing is that they put things in the complaint that were unnecessary. For example, referring to how Dr. Minkoff lost his license previously for the way he prescribed sedatives to Lisa McPherson without actually examining her. Yeah. So they put that in there as the history of this quack, and he's like, that shouldn't be in there, right? Well, of course it should be in there. It's like an exact same situation, a Scientologist in great distress that he mishandles. So that is coming up. But thank you to Mark Bunker. He was at the hearing. We had a nice talk on video, and Mark did a great job.
Awesome. Well, following right on the Emily Armstrong story, this is a Scientologist, high-level doctor, and look what this guy does. And look what he does with his practice, and look what he does with actual medicine versus this quack crap that this guy has been peddling for years.
This woman was telling him she was in such distress, and what was he telling her to do? Her TRs.
It was gross. You read those text messages, you will be disgusted. And the fact that this guy's trying to, slime his way through the court system now by, oh, no, my history of not being a good doctor should in no way, shape, or form, be part of this case about whether I'm a good doctor or not. I mean, come on. You know that in medicine and in practicing medicine, there are going to be mistakes. There are going to be unfortunate circumstances. There are going to be people who are going to maybe not necessarily continue moving on, right? Things happen. But when it's preventable and when it is this preventable, I mean, you just can't. Anyway, it's very, very frustrating. So I'm very, very happy that this judge, like you said, is on the ball and watching closely here. But I hope one story following the other here, we can connect some dots, because this is the level of quackery. And these people, you sit David Minkoff down, you will never hear somebody more sure that they have all the answers to every problem that ails people. It's either his quackery or Scientology that is going to solve every single problem. And they
Yep.
didn't get to me in time, or whatever nonsense he peddles, right? So I get a little irate about these guys. Now, different topic entirely with Scientology. On the immigration side, we mentioned a little bit about immigration stuff last week. What was the story this week?
Well, I get forwarded things that Scientologists say in private Facebook groups and stuff like that, and there was somebody really making a big deal about some organizing being done in Florida for Easter, and that they had been organizing groups and bringing in people. They were having successes, and they mentioned, oh, and we're also setting up some tables for the Russian-speaking kids. I was like, whoa, that kind of implies that most of what they're doing is for Russian-speaking kids. So that was interesting to me, and I've had a couple different of those messages sent to me recently. So I got a hold of Katrina Reyes, because Katrina's story is so incredible. I first wrote about her, gosh, 8 or 9 years ago, and she and her mother were in Siberia, and her grandmother was working for Scientology in Moscow, and they decided to go from Siberia to Flag. Like a lot of other people from Russia and other Eastern European countries, they come to Flag, join the Sea Org. They have no idea what they're getting into. They sign billion-year contracts. Scientology locks up their passports, and they thought they were going to go work for a church and do something religious. No, you're going to be cleaning hotel rooms, right? And they basically become indentured servants.
Yep.
And she was underage. I mean, she was still a kid. Terrible story, and it just gets really bad. And she eventually escaped, and her mother disconnected from her. Her mother is still there at the Flag Land Base. It's another family ripped apart. And so I thought of her when I heard that they're targeting Russian speakers in the Tampa area. And so we talked about that. She had some really interesting observations about that. And then she dug in her old files and found some wonderful photos I hadn't seen before. She was saying, yeah, they would dress up in their Russian traditional dress and put on dances and stuff to make those folks that worked there that were from Russia feel more at home, to bring in more people.
Yep.
And she had wonderful photos. And then she found a photo that broke my heart. She found a photo of literally when that she and her mother were flying from Moscow from the first time to Tampa, and her grandmother was seeing them off. And you can see that her mom's only 28, Katrina's just a little girl, and they're about to fly off and sign themselves their next billion years to Scientology, which eventually ripped apart their family. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, big time, big time, big time, and speaks a bit to what we were talking about last week with, you bring the Russians and then they can bring more Russians, and I don't know, maybe it's like a little Russian doll, and it's just more and more Scientologists inside. We just have to bring them out. What have you seen or heard recently or at all about the whole R1 visa line? And, we're going to bring people over with religious worker visas. This has been a big operation for Scientology.
Yeah, RM Siebert, she really did the best research on that years ago for us, and showed that Scientology is abusing that R1 visa more than anybody. But there really has still not been a crackdown. I know there's been some new changes in the law that might make it a little more difficult for Scientology, but essentially they're bringing people over on visas. You're supposed to, so the idea, I know what the idea behind the law is that the lawmakers were thinking. Okay, there's a church somewhere in the United States, but it's really appeals to immigrants or whatever, and it's got kind of a foreign version of this kind of religion. And you're not going to find a clergy person for that church in the neighborhood. They need to bring in somebody from outside. And so, okay, here's a visa. If you really need to get some religious workers from the country where this religion's from, we're cool with that. And so people get this special, it's called an R1 visa, so they can come over and it's called the religion visa. You can come over to do religious work. Because, again, you're not going to find somebody to run that church in that neighborhood. You need to bring somebody in. But what Scientology, they totally abuse it. They bring in these people saying it's religious work and then put them to work at the Flag Land Base, cleaning hotel rooms, all the manual labor that gets done there, and that's literally what her mom was doing, was cleaning hotel rooms.
Right.
And Katrina was serving food. Okay, so that's what Scientology considers religious work, and so it's a complete abuse of the system. And there was we wrote about it for a number of years ago. New York Magazine had a nice piece a couple of years ago, but I really haven't heard too much lately about what's going on. I'll check with Ms. Siebert again, see if she's got an update. But I think there was a slight change in the law that was going to make it a little harder to do that. I think it would force people to go home once in a while to
Right.
renew things. And I think that would be a problem for Scientology. But, they'll find a way around it.
Well, they classically do. I mean, they get people married off and things like that. I mean, I watched this happen right in front of me. I mean, this is I'm very, I was there when they developed the R1 line, at ASHO. I mean, this is old stuff, and they've been pulling this scam since the 90s. They when they kind of worked it all out and figured out how to talk to the embassy and how to do the applications. And initially, it was out of Mexico. The American St. Hill was really going to town with that. I wanted to point out, of course, that as you said, and it's not an exaggeration to say indentured servitude. That really is a very accurate term for what's happening to these people coming over here. Escaping from Siberia sounds like, yeah, at all costs, get the hell out of there. But no, not at all costs. This is indentured servitude. It's a form of slavery to be in the Sea Org. The other thing I wanted to say is that, and I wanted to ask you about this, one of the things we talked about with Pam Bondi in the position she's in and the various friendly high-level Scientologists who are in key positions right now in Washington are disturbing. And one of the reasons why I said is because they could carve out exceptions in the laws for Scientology. And right now there's a whole immigration thing, and we don't need to get into that, but it's a thing. And so Scientology is going to want to continue to do what they're doing.
Right.
Not going to want to have this interfered with. It's successful for them. So this is exactly the kind of thing I'm thinking.
Well, no, it's a great question, and then this is what I mean. It's still early days. I know it's hard to believe, but we're only 2.5 months into this administration. I know it feels longer than that, but there's been a radical change as far as people, whether they can leave the country and come back and things like that. So, but at the same time that it's becoming more dicey for people here on visas and green cards, that kind of thing. At the same time, what have we been reporting? That you got Pam Bondi, very Scientology friendly person in the AG. You got Trish Duggan at the Kennedy Center. You got John P. Cole as a deputy envoy to Ukraine. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has Scientology ties. So I'm waiting to see how some of that falls out. As far as when is Dave going to make his move? When is David Miscavige going to try to take advantage of this new friendly relationship with the White House? Maybe Dave will just be happy with the idea he probably doesn't have to worry about a Department of Justice investigation for the next 4 years. Maybe that's enough for him. But knowing Dave, the way he's kind of ambitious, he might think maybe there's some ways we can, get Pam Bondi to carve out an exception for R1 visas or something like that. I think that's what you're asking. And I would just say, hey, listen, I'm keeping an eye. I'm trying to find out how these people are their influence is manifesting, and we'll just have to keep an eye on it and see what happens.
Absolutely. Keep in mind that the attitude of David Miscavige and Scientology, Sea Org in general, is make it go right, right? So figure it out, and I don't care what it takes. And with Miscavige, it's handle things so that you never ever have to deal with it again. That's a thing in Scientology for sure, and it is a way that he goes about trying to deal with things like the IRS. The war is over. Like we're never going to have this problem again. That's the kind of problem that's the kind of solution he's going to be looking for on the religious work.
Well, and we can say at least that's one thing we can look at, and that is that we keep hearing that the IRS is going to be decimated. They're just going to fire a lot of people. There's going to be a lot fewer people to examining wealthy people's taxes. But I can tell you that a weakened IRS is going to be a no shape take on the Church of Scientology. So that's more good news for David Miscavige.
Exactly what I'm talking about. All right. Well, now we move to the smaller playing field of Clearwater, Florida, the home of Scientology's international flagland base, which is the biggest service facility. It's sort of the Vatican of Scientology. I love the way you compared it to that this week because it's accurate as hell. So what happened this week? Mark Bunker tuned in again?
Yeah, well, but the previous week, Mark went to a city council meeting because the council was considering whether to sell this street to Scientology, and he was there when they voted 3-2 in favor of that. And it's just this one block of a street that they want to use, Scientology wants to use to kind of create a plaza between where the flag land base is on the north and where the new L. Ron Hubbard Hall will go on the east. And then the Fort Harrison Hotel is across the street. So that's why I kind of talked about it being like the Vatican, because Scientology owns a lot of property all over downtown, and whether you're on Cleveland Street or Fort Harrison Avenue, you're near something. But if you don't really know too much about Scientology, you could probably walk around there and not realize you're in this religious campus, right? Except when you see the flag building. But now that they're putting in an L. Ron Hubbard Hall, the flag building, and then this plaza dedicated to the way to happiness, now you're starting to see more of kind of a sort of a Vatican kind of setup. And they're going to build L. Ron Hubbard Hall one way or the other, I think. But they wanted this little street out in front to complete the plaza. And Mark Bunker was there, saw the vote, and the argument against it from a couple city council members is like, we don't even know. They haven't even given us plans of this L. Ron Hubbard Hall thing. We don't know what's going to happen. But the other three were like, no, we need to get this going. And the point that Mark Bunker makes, and that he was making when he was still on the council, was, listen, we know there's going to be land swaps with David Miscavige, but the issue is, let's make him make the first move. He's keeping all these vacant properties vacant on Cleveland Street and other places. Let's see him make some real moves to get those things going to bring people downtown, and then we'll deal with him. But they're just giving him the street. They voted 3-2. Well, this week there was a work session, another city council meeting. Mark Bunker went again, and this time he was telling us that at the last minute, I think after that 3-2 vote, when people became a little more aware of what was going on, a last minute alternative bid came in to instead use that street to memorialize a particular Black veteran and make it kind of a park dedicated to African Americans in Clearwater. And a very interesting alternative. And you can imagine David Miscavige would probably not be too thrilled about that use of that land. And Mark admitted that it probably will lose out to Scientology in the end. But at Thursday night's meeting, the one of the three council members who had voted for the sale sided with the other two to at least wait a month. So, Miscavige's plan hit a snag. He can't be too happy about it. Well, so we'll see what happens in a month. The other thing that happened at the meeting that Mark Bunker was at, this city councilman, Ryan Cotton, is proving himself to be really pro-Scientology. And he had made a motion to take fluoride out of the drinking water in Clearwater, which, if you know the history of quackery and crackpots and conspiracy theories, this is like just one of the most basic things of all time. It's,
Oh.
the John Birch Society was arguing about taking fluoride out of drinking water, decades ago. And it's just like, the civilized world knows you just have a little fluoride in the water, it makes everybody's teeth better. But the conspiracy theorists are all freaked out about it. And so Ryan Cotton made a motion and revealed that the people that were most for it, that had sent in letters, were Scientologists. Scientology's on board because, Scientologists tend to be conspiracy theorists in the Alex Jones mold.
Yep.
And so, they are into this, anti-fluoridation thing. The only flat earthers that I have ever seen in my own feeds are Scientologists and ex-Scientologists, right? I mean, it's that kind of conspiracy they kind of fall for. So that was interesting to see that Ryan Cotton is even trying to carry non-fluoridated water for Scientology, and that got shot down because Mike Menino, the one guy that's probably on his side most of the time, was saying, "Yeah, but I think they're trying to kill it at the state level, so let's wait for see that first." And Florida might. I mean, Utah did. So just a couple of odd things that happened Thursday night, and that did not go David Miscavige's way. And so, this city council is maybe showing a little bit of spirit, but like Mark Bunker says, he thinks in the end they probably will end up selling the street to Miscavige, and they'll turn it into this giant shrine to L. Ron Hubbard, which is just what Clearwater needs, right, Chris?
Oh, so much. Oh, I was just trying to imagine how Miscavige would feel having a street dedicated to a black veteran or historical figure rather than Scientology between two Scientology buildings. It would caught. I mean, his head would explode before he'd let that happen.
Yeah.
I mean, he'd fair game them to anyway. Miscavige. I had to comment on the fact that it really is a sign of the times that that the point of common ground that Scientology is finding with the local city council is this level of nonsense, of fluoridation, of pseudoscience. And as we just talked to, I mean, all the stories really connect this week. Minkoff, the pseudoscience. I mean, Minkoff is not an outlier in Scientology. So if you understand that, and I've made that point thousands of times over the years with conspiracy theories in Scientology, I have whole videos on it. I used to use conspiracy theory in Scientology to recruit new Scientologists. I mean, it's a science in that group, the conspiracy theory stuff, and it comes straight out of Hubbard's lips. He was one of the original conspiracy theorists,
right?
So it's all in there, and I don't think the word is ironic, but coincidentally, the Mormons, get fluoridation out of Utah. Well, guess who owns more land in Florida than anybody else? The Mormons. So of course they're working overtime to get that passed in Florida as well. So here you have Scientology, kook, Mormons, pseudoscience, and this is how they get influence on the city council. It's almost comedic. You almost can't even believe that reality works this way, but this is Clearwater, Florida. This is how it is there. So it was a real window. I really, really, really loved that you got Mark Bunker on there, and that you guys could dive deeper on this.
Well, look, Mark Bunker went on his own. I'm just very fortunate that he talked to me afterwards, and he's so great at that. And I told him he's just showing how much Clearwater needs him, and I hope people are paying attention.
Oh, big time. I was literally about to say he is the man in Clearwater for what's actually going on with Scientology there, and knowing what's really going on behind the scenes, because he's on the city, so I always, definitely look forward to more from him on that as we move forward. Finally, we can finally get to the good news. I mean, all this Now something cool happened this week. Lay it on us.
Oh, well, they were very secretive about it. I didn't hear anything until Phil Jones contacted me earlier this week and said, I got a story for you. And, Phil was the one 9 years ago who first came up with this idea of a billboard in Los Angeles. And he and I worked closely on that and getting that story out. And then he put up a billboard in Clearwater. And then last year, with the Aftermath Foundation, Phil put up a billboard right outside the Big Blue in L.A. But Scientology immediately put up a scissor lift to cover it, and then basically intimidated Clear Channel into taking it down just a couple days later.
Yep.
That was last year. So he comes back to me and says, we got another billboard. I'm like, really? Where this time? He said, well, there's 20 of them. And that's what the Aftermath Foundation had been cooking up ever since that problem last year was, okay, they can put a scissor lift up in front of one billboard, but they can't do it in front of 20.
Nope.
So Phil let me know that it was mostly the work of Alex Barnes Ross and Catherine Olson, that they had put in the heavy work. And they purposely worked with Lamar, which is, of all the companies that Phil's worked with, he says they're the ones that are the most reliable. And that they had worked closely to try to pick locations where Sea Org workers would see these things on their way to work or between orgs. And that's what I told Mark that I was, Phil, that I was so excited about, because, you can put something on the web that somebody looks at for a few seconds, but a billboard, if that's on your way to work every day, that's going to work on you. If you have the littlest bit of a doubt, it's right there. There's a phone number right there.
Right.
There's Mike Rinder looking at you from a billboard. There's Claire Headley looking at you from a billboard. Wonderful new billboard designs they have. And like I said, they got 20 of them up. And I asked Alex and I asked Phil, please, if you hear about any shenanigans this time from Scientology, let me know. And so far, we haven't heard about anything.
Yep.
So great move by the Aftermath Foundation. And, I think these efforts really work. They do help a lot of people. People leaving Scientology can go to them and get real help. Now, with the nature of the privacy, we don't always hear about these people, and that's totally understandable. But believe me, they are helping people, and what a great new tool to work on those Sea Org workers day after day. Lamar told Alex that with that many billboards in the locations they're in, 1.8 million people a week are going to be seeing those billboards, Chris.
Nice. And that keeps the message alive and out there, right? So it's seed planting for the Sea Org members, and it's keeping the message of Scientology out there, as the toxic thing that it is. So I just loved it. I did not have any idea about that at all. So go, guys. That is great. Any other sort of heads up besides what we talked about?
I'm expecting an appeal brief this week that's going to be interesting to read. So as soon as I've got that, I'll let you know.
Awesome. We love your viewership. Leave your comments. I love your feedback. And I don't say this enough, but we would really love to hear what y'all are thinking and saying about this stuff, because you guys sometimes have takes on this stuff that we don't see. And I love that. So anyway, feel free. I'll see you guys next week. Thanks, Tony. Bye-bye.